All right, welcome back to Bleck and AZ's Fantasy Hour. We are here on WEBR from 6 to 7 every Wednesday, and you can find us on WLVL Sunday mornings from 11 to 12 as well. We're talking about some training camp notes. We're entering training camp. Yep, football is just around the corner.
It's crazy.
2 weeks to the Hall of Fame
Hall of
game.
Fame game, yeah.
Yep, we're getting so close. Finally made it through the rough part of the off season.
It was fun though.
Yeah,
it was cool.
filled it a lot better than I thought we would have,
Yeah,
honestly. Especially having moved to a full hour. Really did a good job filling those slots with some topics on some weeks when there really wasn't much to talk about.
Yeah, well done.
Yeah, but now we have plenty to talk about, honestly. So on this week's episode, we will be talking about things to keep an eye on in training camp, especially relating to fantasy football mostly. Sure. There's lots of positional battles, lots of rookies entering their first season, guys coming back from injury, just lots of things to really keep an eye on, especially entering draft season in August. So we'll be pushing a lot of that stuff out in the next coming month or so, as well as our radio shows on WEBR and WLVL. You can find us on Instagram at Bleck and AZ as well, and on YouTube, Bleck and AZ's Fantasy Hour. We have our full recordings up every week with the full episode. So if you don't catch us on the radio, you can catch us on YouTube and Instagram as well. Yeah, moving into training camp. Before we start going into some individual teams and certain players we're looking to keep an eye on, we should probably talk about the Bills.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have the red, white, blue practice coming up in a couple of weeks. It'll be fans' first look in the new stadium. I'm super excited for that.
Yeah, you going?
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know if you've gone years prior.
No, I've gone before.
Yeah.
I went to like one of them, but I usually don't go to things like that. But probably going to sell my preseason tickets, try to make a little extra cash back for those hefty seasons now.
Yeah.
But since it's a free event and it's going to be the first look, I definitely want to get in there, see my seats, see the new stadium, get a good feel for the layout, so I'm not just walking in there blind on Thursday night after a long tailgate, I'm sure. So yeah, I'm really excited for that. I can't wait. But looking into training camp, there's lots of things to keep an eye on as Bills fans because we have a new coaching staff. Joe Brady is going to be his first training camp and offseason as the head coach. We have a new defensive coordinator. That's what I'm personally most looking forward to keep an eye on. Full new defense, transitioning to a 3-4, and just seeing how some of these players fit in new positions and new roles.
Yeah. Really said about it as well as you can. That all starts with the coaching staff. A full season with being more influential with what Bean does in the draft. It'll be interesting to see how some of these guys fit into a brand new scheme and how Leonard's able to take some of these guys that aren't really made for the scheme that they're going to implement and how he works around some of their strengths and weaknesses. I'm not expecting a top 10 defense this year, but I'm certainly interested to see the direction that we start to head in. It's not impossible, obviously.
Definitely not out of the question. Our defense has been, pretty solid for a long time. And, a big part of that is, because of Sean McDermott and what he was able to achieve in the regular season specifically. But I think it'll be interesting to see some of the new just tweaks that they have on defense and a different philosophy. I think they're going to be a lot more aggressive this year than we've seen in years past. Like I said, switching to a 3-4, seeing some of the edge rushers, like Greg Rousseau specifically is somebody I'm really excited to see play in a new position, stand up outside. I think people don't realize exactly how freakishly athletic he is for a guy that size. Bradley Chubb, probably our biggest addition in the offseason. Someone I'm really excited to see play opposite Greg Rousseau. And it'll be really interesting to see the things he brings to the Bills outside of on the field. If you've seen any of his interviews, he has a really good one with Eric Wood recently that is worth checking out. But he's really kind of stepped into a mentorship role for the Bills and a leadership role, something that he did for the Dolphins as well. So I think that'll be really fun to see in training camp and throughout the offseason and into the regular season as well.
Yeah, given the makeup of the defense and transitioning to a new system, they've kind of overhauled some of the veteran leadership. Matt Milano still is unsigned. Trey White, who had plenty of years before his comeback to Buffalo, also isn't signed, and they bring in a guy like Bradley Chubb, and they bring in a safety in CJ GJ. So it'll be interesting to see how these new veterans kind of mentor some of these younger guys. drafted the corner IGB in the second round. Cole Bishop going into his third year now.
Cole Bishop would be a big one to keep an eye on for sure, stepping into year 3 after a big year 2.
Yeah, and I know he was a 4th or 5th round pick, but I'm excited to see Kilgore in the preseason too, and just kind of see what he can bring to the table, because he'll be kind of a gadget guy on defense.
Definitely, that's what I'm saying. It'll be interesting to see how they use him, because he can play so many different positions. And like you said, the transition in leadership is going to be really interesting to see. Besides the veterans we added from free agency or wherever that may be, just seeing guys that have been here for a while stepping in new roles. Christian Benford, Terrell Bernard, some of these guys, they really have to step up. Ed Oliver, Greg Rousseau,
for sure.
He's a young guy. People don't realize because he was drafted so young, and but he's been here for a while. And even though he's only 25, I think he's entering year 5, and in a new position for him too. It's going to be really interesting to see throughout the offseason, like we said. I think the development of some of the defensive line players, some of the guys we drafted last year, whether that's TJ Sanders, Deion Walker especially, someone I'm really excited to see. And like you said, the corners as well, IGB, and Maxwell Harrison. That'll be a really interesting battle for cornerback too. I think a lot of people kind of just assume that Maxwell Harrison has that role, but just given that he was drafted last year, for a Sean McDermott defense, and now we have this guy that we drafted. And it seems like the Bills really targeted. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out in training camp. That's definitely one to keep an eye on, the cornerback 2 battle for sure.
100%.
And on the offensive side of the ball, if it's not Bradley Chubb, it's definitely DJ Moore.
Right.
Seeing how he develops chemistry with Josh Allen throughout training camp and the preseason will be something to keep an eye on here as a Bills fan and in the fantasy world as well.
Yeah, so giving Joe Brady the reins of this team, and he's calling offense, he's not relinquishing that to Carmichael, but since Joe Brady's been here, he's been able to, probably under the guidance of Sean McDermott, or just the direction that McDermott wanted the team, was able to establish the run at the highest level in the league. It's not necessarily Joe Brady's MO. I think when we think back on the stops that he's been at in his career, it's highlight seasons from DJ Moore, or even further back in college with one of the most prolific college passing teams that we can kind of recall at this point in time. So it'll be interesting to I'm interested to see how much more he's willing to lean into the passing game, given a slight but significant kind of contradictory, but the upgrade of DJ Moore is definitely going to kind of loosen things up for everybody else, I think.
Yeah, and all the guys after DJ Moore as well, there's going to be lots of battles for those other spots on the field.
For sure.
Because, outside of DJ Moore and Khalil Shakir, everything else is up in the air, whether that's Josh Palmer coming back from an injury, or Keon Coleman developing further. He even said himself he believes this is a make or break year for him, and I think we can all probably agree on
100%.
that. And then Skylar Bell, someone that a lot of people were really excited about when the Bills drafted him.
Still am.
Yeah, exactly. All-American, put up some huge seasons in college, and walking into the NFL at I think age 23 or 24. Yeah. He should be ready to go really, and it'll be really interesting to see how those guys line up and how they prioritize them throughout training camp and in the preseason as well, whether they play with the 1s, the 2s, or even the 3s.
Yeah.
Seeing Dalton Kincaid come back from injury, a fully healthy Dalton Kincaid season would be just absolutely huge for the Bills.
Yeah.
When he plays, he's probably our best receiver.
Yeah.
Obviously with the addition of DJ Moore, we'll see how that plays out. But I think Dalton Kincaid's health will be one of the biggest things to focus on throughout the offseason here, the rest of the offseason, I should say.
Yeah, especially too with just the way that we've kind of mentioned a couple times over the past couple of weeks, the way that the league is moving into a little bit more tight end heavy personnel. And it kind of speaks also to which receivers are going to get the field. If they're kind of taking away one receiver in their packages and making that a tight end instead, that makes that competition for wide receiver play even higher, really.
Yeah, and when you talk about this new era or this trend in the NFL, we could call it, with 2-3 tight end sets, the Bills have kind of been one of the leaders in that aspect. And I think guys like Jackson Hawes and even Dawson Knox, I think when we saw Dawson Knox get that contract and then they drafted Dalton Kincaid, I was so confused.
I was lost.
But
lost.
It's honestly become a thing in the NFL, really. 2 tight ends are huge, and the Bills have one of the best 2 tight end punches, even 3, with Jackson Hawes now.
I don't know if I can name another 2 tight end.
I think about Colson Loveland and Cole Kmet. Like,
Sure,
that's one
yeah.
that, like, comes to mind.
I guess Mike Mayer and Brock
Yeah,
Bowers.
that's another one. Yeah, I mean, even like Tucker Kraft and
Musgrave.
Yeah, exactly. You know, we've kind of seen, and even look at the NFL draft this past season. How many tight ends went in the second and third round? You know, I mean, I just mentioned Colson Loveland and Cole Kmet, and then they drafted Sam Rush in like the third round. You know, it's like, so the teams are really prioritizing those tight ends and seeing how they utilize them. It's really interesting, and I think the Bills are a little ahead of the curve in that aspect. So it'll be fun to see even a guy like Jackson Hawes in his development going into year 2.
Yeah, we'll without a doubt be tracking this very closely and probably bring it up every week.
Yeah,
it's time now.
And like you said, though, when you have 2-3 tight ends on the set, it's what wide receiver comes off the field, and we know DJ Moore is going to be on the field. We know Khalil Shakir is more than likely going to be on the field, but who's going to be on the field mostly in those 3 wide receiver sets?
Yeah.
Right now, if I had to, I would hope it would be Keon Coleman personally, but we'll see.
That's probably like best upside. Oh, I don't know. I mean, maybe Skylar Bell and Shakir are kind of compared to like being very similar players to each other. So maybe it's not going to be Bell and Shakir on the field at the same time, but maybe it is. I don't know. We'll see what Joe Brady has up his sleeve. He's going to pull out some bags of tricks, not in the preseason, but over the course of the season.
But the preseason can be a good indicator, you know, like when we see, because we're going to see the ones play at some point, just because of again, for the sake of building chemistry with some of these new targets
in competition with this wide receiver room.
But it'll be interesting to see who plays with the ones and who plays with the twos and who plays with the threes. Because if we see Keon Coleman playing in the fourth quarter of a preseason game, that probably says a lot.
For sure.
So it'll be really interesting, something to keep an eye on for sure as Bills fans.
Definitely.
But moving throughout the league, there's lots of stories for every team really, especially when it comes to fantasy. I know Bleck has a few Bleck stars written down. Maybe we could start out with one of those.
Probably the most important thing that I think we'll all end up just kind of keeping tabs on. I don't know if anyone's going to deep dive into it until the season starts, but there's a lot of guys, a lot of really important players, especially in the fantasy world, that are coming off of pretty major injuries. Pat Mahomes being someone that we've talked about a couple times, ACL and LCL tear. Looks like he's targeting the season opener, but I think when that injury happened, the entire sports world was like very skeptical of that being the case. But it does look like it does look like he's trending well right now for it.
Thanksgiving, I think.
Yeah, whether he's able to start week 1 or not, he's going to be under a microscope. There's going to be a lot of people, us included, just really watching to see how mobile he's willing to be, especially early in the season. I know it's been a topic with Josh over the first couple of seasons of his that some of the coaches and management want you to pull the reins back a little bit so that you're healthy for the important games at the end of the season. And I would certainly expect that to be the case for Pat Mahomes. But we'll see how he comes out right away.
Yeah, like you said, whether he is or isn't able to play week 1, but even if he is, there's definitely going to be some type of restrictions or limitations, is probably the better way to put it. And a big part of what makes Patrick Mahomes so great is his ability to make plays out of nothing, and a large part of that is due to his athleticism.
For sure.
Probably the most underrated aspect of his game. And, when you look at the Chiefs signing Justin Fields, it kind of signals that maybe they do have some concerns. Mm-hmm. So that's something that, throughout training camp, we'll see how much they really have Mahomes moving around and how much he's really doing.
Yeah.
And that affects a lot of different players in the fantasy world as far as the Chiefs go.
Yeah, 100%.
And their wide receivers are another one to, you're going to want to see what they have going on there. Rashee Rice is somebody that we've talked about a lot this offseason. I kind of expect him to play at this point. There hasn't been any type of formal suspension or any talks of one, really. But after that, Hollywood Brown was a big player for them last year. He's gone. Xavier Worthy has had his issue staying on the field. Then when we look at some of the other guys they have there, Tyquan Thornton, Jalen Royals, a guy they drafted last year, and then Cyrus Allen. So those are guys that will definitely be really interesting to see how that positional group works out, because a healthy Mahomes, it's a great option to have thrown to one of those guys.
Yeah. A team that I kind of am just going to keep my eyes on all preseason and training camp just to see how everybody's shaking out is the Giants. And I know that you've got a couple shares with neighbors in a couple of dynasty formats, but I don't know if you saw this video of Cam Scabo doing flips on this busted knee.
Yeah,
but that's a wild boy. That's why we love him, but that's a wild boy. But between him and Malik Neighbors, Jackson Dart's not coming off of like a major injury to end his season the same way that these two are, but the three of those players are obviously like, I don't know, that's the difference of them having like a winning season and a top 3 pick, really, even though we've kind of already determined who we expect the top 3 picks to be in some order. But yeah, those injuries, if they linger, can absolutely derail them. So it'll be interesting to see if Malik Neighbors is ready to start the season off right away.
Neighbors is definitely probably, like, in my opinion, like the biggest injury of the off season.
For sure.
Because I think I do expect Mahomes to play. I expect almost all these other guys really to play week 1.
Yeah.
Like I said, if there's some type of limitations or restrictions, you know, I do believe there will be some. But Neighbors is a guy that I am a little concerned about. If he's healthy and he's participating in training camp, that'll be a great sign. And to what degree, obviously, that we'll see. But that's somebody that's a big candidate to start the year on the pup. And whether that's announced sooner than later could affect how he's drafted in fantasy formats, is obviously.
And it already is. I mean, he's going in maybe like the 3rd round in most drafts right now, so that risk is already kind of baked into where he's going in drafts this early into draft season. But yeah, any updates on him is going to sway that average draft position pretty significantly, I think.
And then, like, the repercussions outside of that, like, you know, like the domino effect. So, I mean, if Neighbors doesn't play, I mean, who's catching the ball? You know what I mean?
Mooney.
Is it Darnell Mooney?
He's on the. He's an option, but
Darnell Mooney, Calvin Austin, Darius Slayton,
Isaiah Likely.
Isaiah Likely is, I think, the biggest benefactor for sure. Regardless of Neighbors is healthy week 1 or not, he's a guy that I'll probably be targeting in a lot of leagues.
Yeah, he's a good late round target.
I love Isaiah Likely this year in fantasy, and he could very well be the number 1 target on the team for the first month of the season.
Not more, yeah.
Yeah, and Malachi Fields is a guy they drafted too that potentially we can see win that wide receiver 2 battle. I wouldn't expect him to out of training camp, but at some point in the season, I don't think he has much of an uphill battle to get past some of the likes of Mooney, Austin, and Darius Slayton. So that's another eye to keep on as maybe a late round fun sleeper.
I can't wait to get into some of our own rankings list in a couple of weeks, man. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Another big injury that I think that hasn't been talked about a lot, a couple of tight ends. Tucker Kraft in Green Bay and George Kittle in San Francisco, and seeing how those guys participate in training camp and how they open up the season, because at their peak, I mean, they're 2 of the best tight ends in the game. And when there's not really that much at the top, you know, those are guys that in the middle of the drafts are high risk, high reward. So those will be guys to really focus on during the preseason.
100%. And Kittle over 30. I think he's like 32, 33 now. Coming off tearing his Achilles, which is like
that's worse.
One of the worst injuries, right?
Especially at that age.
They say he's on track for week 1 right now, but I'm pretty sure their week 1 game is like in Australia. So maybe.
Oh, he'll be there.
Yeah. Maybe that's not the best decision, but hey, maybe there's less. What is it? Radioactivity. Electroactivity.
It's not radioactivity.
Whatever.
It's electromagnetic.
There's less electromagnetic.
It's not a nuclear plant.
Whatever. Same difference.
Mutating.
So yeah, maybe it's less wise for him to go to Australia to play week 1. Maybe it's more wise. I couldn't really tell. I think it's against Seattle too. It's the season opener, if I'm not mistaken. So obviously it's a big matchup that could come to play late in the season for seeding for the division, but definitely gonna keep my eye on Kittle for sure. Again,
with those 2 teams too, it's like the trickle down effect of the injuries and the impacts they have on fantasy, the implications. With Green Bay, they lost Romeo Doubs, they lost Ontavion Wicks. If Tucker Kraft isn't healthy to start week 1, I mean, Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, and Matthew Golden, and seeing how that plays out, really. Christian Watson will be a really popular pick this year. He got a big contract extension, and he played really well last year. He's pretty much always played really well when he's able to stay on the field. And you could say the same thing for Jaden Reed, really.
Yes.
But those are guys that'll be really interesting to see how they pan out in as late round picks in fantasy.
Yeah, like I said, Matt Golden too. Coming off of his rookie season, had a couple of flashes.
He had that big play in the playoffs. Yeah.
Plenty of reason to believe that he's got potential that he can reach this.
A lot of people will be out on him because they feel burned by him from last year, but he's a guy that who knows? As a late round sleeper. If Tucker Kraft isn't able to be there, I mean, he should be able to find his way into some targets pretty easily.
For sure.
And same thing in San Francisco to see how their wide receiver room pans out with or without Kittle week 1. Mike Evans is there now, but they do have Ricky Pearsall, Bleck's guy. They also have Christian Kirk, who could be a sneaky vet. People aren't gonna like that Christian Kirk, but I feel like he's a guy that would probably outperform his ADP more than likely. And Dejon Stribling.
Your boy.
I wouldn't say that, but given his draft capital, it'll just be really interesting to see how they really, how that pans out as far as snaps and targets for those guys.
Yeah.
There's a lot to go around, with Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, But like I said, those guys got to find their way on the field somehow. You don't draft a guy 33rd overall to not put him on the field.
That's true.
And same thing with Keep Pearsall, first-round pick. So those are all guys to keep an eye on throughout training camp and see how those position battles kind of work out and how their wide receiver sets end up aligning.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Moving on to another Bleck star here. What do you got?
Well, there's still some movement to be expected. There's still a handful of guys that are probably worth rostering on your fantasy teams that are still free agents in the league.
Dynasty league, some deeper dynasties.
Yeah, I mean,
sure.
I feel like I've done a few best ball drafts so far, and I feel like I even see like Diggs going and Deebo Samuel going later in the draft because obviously we have no idea where they go, what
They should
situations
find their
they're
way
finding
into a
them in.
roster at some point.
And probably the field. And I mean, we've kind of touched on how easy it would probably get to how easy they could probably find some snaps on like the Raiders offense or Miami's offense or Washington. There's just a couple examples there. But yeah, definitely expect some of those guys to find teams. Taysom Hill is still a free agent. That's one of my guys. But he's probably
We're not keeping. You could drop Taysom Hill from your dynasty teams. Don't worry. But Diggs and Deebo for sure. Two guys. I expect one of them to play for Washington this season.
Yeah.
I'm willing to say that.
Yeah.
They both have connections there. Deebo obviously playing there last year, and then Stephon Diggs being from the area. I think they would immensely upgrade that wide receiver core because after Terry McLaurin, there really is not much there, unfortunately. Antonio Williams will be a popular sleeper pick in fantasy this season. Definitely was in Dynasty already. But really after that, I mean...
Yeah, they've got like a collection of guys that could all just be practice
Luke
squad
McCaffrey,
players.
Treylon Burks,
Miami Brown, Van Jefferson. Jalen Lane.
I mean, they have a bunch of bodies, but we're really not banking on any of those guys to make huge impacts fantasy-wise at least.
Definitely not drafting any of them, I'll tell you that.
No, as far as the free agent pool goes, there definitely is a couple big names out there and something to keep an eye on, especially if there's any injuries in training camp, because that how that goes. Tyreek Hill is another guy.
Yeah, I don't think he's retiring. I mean, he's coming off of an ACL. What was it? He twisted his knee in half or something like that. Yeah,
destroyed.
And that happened like in the middle of the season last year too. So.
Yeah, he probably won't play at all until the end of the season, but a name to keep an eye on because when he's on the field, he's one of the biggest impact players in the NFL that we've seen over the last handful of years.
And over the age of 30, there's totally like justifiable reason for skepticism about that, but he does exist. He's not retired. Like, there's a shot. There's a shot in the dark.
For sure. Sticking to some of these skill position groups that we really want to focus on throughout training camp. I know Bleck has the Jaguars written down, and I think that's a good one. Their wide receiver room, there's three guys, Jacoby Myers, Brian Thomas Jr., and Parker Washington. And I think everybody has a guy they like, and you could make a case for any one of them. But seeing how they go in drafts, they're all kind of in the same relative area.
It's kind of weird, honestly.
And seeing how the Jaguars use them in training camp and preseason will be huge. Looking forward to the regular season.
Yeah, having the continuity of Liam Cohen, which obviously we would expect after a great season for the Jaguars last year, we kind of got a glimpse into like how they may be using them moving forward. Obviously, Parker Washington came on huge towards the end of the year, and Brian Thomas Jr. went missing.
And Jacoby Myers was a huge piece to unlocking the offense.
Absolutely.
And the offense really took a step forward when they made that trade, and they rewarded him pretty quickly, honestly. They gave him an extension.
Yeah.
And, like I said, you can really make a case for any of those guys. I think we talked a lot about Parker Washington. We even talked about some of his futures odds and some of his lines. I like Parker Washington to have 1,000 yards this year. I think that he's the best of the three as far as fantasy and probably real life. But when we talk about fantasy, there's lots of different
versions.
And best ball is something I know that Bleck has been big into this offseason.
Can't stop.
And if you want to go for like a high upside best ball, I think Brian Thomas is one of the best out there.
For sure. And in that setting and really all of your leagues, really. I mean, you're going to run into people in your drafts that are shooting for floors and some that are going to be shooting for the ceilings. And in best ball, like that's how you're going to win is by picking the right ceiling plays.
And Brian Thomas is going to have some spike weeks for sure. He'll be a frustrating player to have in fantasy.
Yeah.
Maybe I would call him like a poor man's Jamison Williams. If that's probably along the lines of what I think.
I
could see him having 1,000 yards and like 9 touchdowns, but like 70% of it's going to come in like 4 games.
Yeah.
What I mean?
Yeah.
And that's sometimes, one of the most frustrating players to have in fantasy.
For sure.
He'll win you some weeks, but he'll probably lose you a lot more. But in best ball, it's a great thing to have.
Yeah,
those spike weeks will really do a lot for you. And when you're talking about these floors and ceilings, Brian Thomas might have some of the highest floors or ceiling weeks, I should say.
Yeah.
And Jacoby Myers might have the highest floor weeks.
Yeah.
But I think you're getting a really good happy medium with Parker Washington, and he's a guy that I would really like to have on my team as a wide receiver 3 this year that I'll be drafting all off season that I think offers wide receiver 2 upside.
Yeah, we're in a shared auction league, and I can't wait to run up that price. And even if you stick him with me, I'm not going to be mad. I think he's in a good spot for the season coming
Auction
up.
league drafts are so fun. If you guys have never done one, go do one. I have this really stupid strategy that I really stick to every season for no reason other than just to be stubborn. But I usually blow like 70% of my budget on like the top 2 running backs and then just figure it out after that. It's a lot of fun. Bleck's strategy is to conserve as much fake money he has.
Yeah, not take anybody in the first 50 auctions.
Yeah.
And it worked out. 2 years ago, I won the league.
Yeah, I won the league too before. I think last year I had like Gibbs and Bijan, or I had like Gibbs and McCaffrey or something crazy. I don't know. It's funny because I just love doing that because there's no other league where you're going to be able to do that. You know what I mean?
It's by far the most unique roster construction setting.
Yeah,
and
it's fun.
Yeah, for guys like ourselves who are in a bunch of different, snake draft options or, dynasty leagues, like it's a really fun opportunity to actually, they say the term, go get your guy. You can get your guy.
100%.
You can get every one of your guys.
And you can like nominate players that oh, I know this guy in my league loves them, you know what I mean, and make him pay up for him. It's fun. It is a lot of fun.
Do recommend.
Yes. Sticking to Jacksonville, though, outside of the wide receiver room, I think the running back room is another one. Yeah. We already talked about the impact of Travis Etienne and his departure. They do have Basil Tootin, who was like a 3rd or 4th round pick last year, I believe, kind of as the favorite to lead the backfield this year. They also do have Chris Rodriguez, who kind of had an underrated season last year. And if you haven't heard already, he did play under Liam Cain in college. And there's lots of ties and familiarity there that people have kind of drawn some comparisons. So it'll be really, really interesting to see how those guys, operate, whether it's a true split or more of a 60-40 or 70-30, whether Chris Rodriguez is getting goal line work or early down carries, versus Basil Tootin being more of a change of pace. Or is Basil Tootin really going to get an opportunity to be a workhorse? We don't know. I'm kind of leaning towards the idea of it being like a 60-40 split, but that's, we've yet to see. And that'll be something to keep an eye on.
I think I would even go a little bit more aggressively for Tootin, maybe like a 70-30 or like a 65-35. I heard this really funny thing about Chris Rodriguez and just kind of like the player that he is. They say if you need a yard, you give it to Chris Rodriguez, he's going to give you 3. If you need 5 yards and you give it to Chris Rodriguez, he's going to give you 3. So he's just very much like just between the tackles, just push the pile a little bit. And I don't think that that's going to be enough to help them sustain drives. I think Basil Tootin gives them a little bit more juice.
Definitely.
And also, Tootin had success in the red zone as well. So I'm not sold that Chris Rodriguez is, inheriting some kind of, workload. I think he's got to earn it. But, the connection with the coach is obviously wildly in his favor.
There's definitely two different philosophies there. Yeah. And, I understand why. Basil Tootin is definitely a guy that in drafts, I think he's like kind of like, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, like 5th, 6th round pick area now, I'd say. Somebody that if you're doing the hero running back or zero running back strategy, he could really offer some high upside returns. Yeah. But there is a world where, like I said, it is kind of a little more of a 60-40, and Chris Rodriguez is getting some of those valuable goal line touches. So that's something that we'll have to keep an eye on throughout preseason. I'm really interested to see if Chris Rodriguez is getting carries in the first quarter, he's shooting up my draft board personally. Yeah. I'm not going crazy on him,
but he enters like, the 8th or 7th round instead.
I don't even know if I'd, maybe not even that high, but he's somebody I'm definitely targeting in the double-digit rounds for sure as like my RB5. You know what I mean? Yeah. But if it's really all Basil Tootin, and then when the starters go out, Chris Rodriguez comes in, that might change things for me and Basil Tootin, honestly. Yeah. So I think that's one of the most interesting running back splits to keep an eye on throughout training camp. Another one that comes to me off the top of my head, didn't even write it down, but Seattle. Yeah. And their usage of Jadarian Price, Emmanuel Wilson, George Halani. those are guys that I'm really going to focus on in preseason and see who's getting the bulk of the touches early in the first quarter. I feel like George Holani is a guy that like nobody talks about, but like the Seahawks really like him.
Yeah.
I mean, that guy was getting touches in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's another backfield that is going to be very split between fantasy managers throughout the draft process.
I'm going to do my best to stay away from that backfield.
Yeah, you're going to have
all
so much George Holani.
All of them. I'm going to have all of them. But yeah, no, I mean, we bring up Seattle's running back room, and it does, elicit Charbonnet coming off of his injury that we'll see how long it takes him to recover, but he got injured deep in the playoffs. So I do think that it's his backfield to lose. Maybe Price makes that more difficult, but I don't think
Charbonnet?
Yeah.
Oh, when he comes back?
When he comes back, yeah.
I don't know, man. I think it's going to be just as frustrating as it has been with Kenneth Walker, honestly.
Yeah, honestly, this whole conversation is frustrating. So let's just move on from Seattle.
Yeah, seriously. Let's just not draft any of those guys and make it easy on ourselves.
Yeah, right.
When we look through these teams, or when I have at least, moving into the training camp, especially in the fantasy world, it really comes down to a lot of wide receiver battles.
Yeah.
Another one that I think is really interesting is going to be Miami's wide receiver room.
Yeah.
They're a team that we talked about as being potentially the worst team in the NFL. They're going to be losing a lot of games, which means they're going to be throwing the ball a lot. And whether you like it or not, someone has to catch the ball.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's going to be Tutu Atwell or Malik Washington.
Some of these names are just insane, dude.
Yeah, I don't know.
Jalen Tolbert, Jalen Rieger, Terrence Marshall. They do.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
Terrace Marshall?
Terrace Marshall.
Oh, dude, what?
Yeah.
These guys are borderline fielding a high-end XFL team when it comes to the wide receiver group. Yeah. They do have Caleb Douglas, though.
Yep.
Rookie that they drafted in the 3rd round.
Yep.
And Kevin Coleman, yeah. That was a guy that I think was like kind of underrated throughout the draft process.
Yep,
I saw somebody, I don't remember who it was, some podcast I was listening to, but like their hot take was like Kevin Coleman is like wide receiver 1 for the Dolphins this year.
That's kind of gross.
Yeah. And Chris Bell, who was a fun prospect, but more than likely going to start the year on the pup.
Yeah.
When I look at these guys, there is nothing that really stands out to me. They're going to be, obviously they're probably going to rotate through multiple different sets to get a good look. 'Cause I don't think any one of these guys necessarily demands snaps or targets.
I think it's almost more likely.
I think it's a true battle throughout training camp and preseason to really earn those spots. And any one of them can.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, they might just choose to go into the Wildcat all season.
Yeah.
Because, like, they could all also not prove the stock of even really investing in that much of a passing game, I think, because it's
they're gonna have to
at some point. When you're down 30 in the third,
I guess,
you
can't really run the ball too much in the 3rd, 4th quarter when you're down by 2 scores. But that being said, my favorite pass catcher for the Dolphins is 100% Greg Dulcich.
Yeah.
I think that throughout the start of the offseason, it was kind of like a joke.
Totally mocked it. I absolutely did, for sure.
But more I've got into it, I mean, I see Greg Dulcich garnering over 100 targets potentially, easily.
Yeah, so he's going into his 4th or 5th season, and I saw something that said that he doesn't have 500 career receiving yards, and he's going to smash that this year.
I think Greg Dulcich could be like a sneaky contender for like a top 10, top 12 tight end in fantasy this year.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, I don't know what his ADP is. If I had to guess, it's probably like 19, 20
I think he's like
tight end
40.
No way is that low, but might as well be, I guess, in some people's minds. I mean, if you're not in the top 20, I mean, it doesn't really matter after that.
And especially in today's league, man, there's so many 2 tight end sets, and everybody gets a
He's
little bit hurt, I
going
guess.
to easily crush that ADP.
Yeah.
And like I said, 100 plus targets is very realistic given the circumstances.
That would be so, but realistic, like you said.
I mean, what is that, like 6 targets a game? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if he plays all 17 games, like that's very within the, I mean, I could shout out a crazier number than 100, but I'm just going to leave it at that. But that, like I said, that all that considered, I think Greg Dulcich is extremely underrated in fantasy.
Yeah.
And somebody that I'll be targeting. If I don't end up with like Brock Bowers or Trey McBride on my team, I'm not drafting a tight end until round 11.
No, you wouldn't go Loveland or Warren in the top 5 rounds?
I mean, I would consider Warren in the 5th round.
Yeah.
I think Loveland is probably going
to
get drafted a little higher than I would like personally.
Fair.
But yeah, sure. Outside of those top 4 guys, let's say.
Yeah.
I'm getting likely, I should say, in round like 10. And then I'm taking Dulcich in round 16, and I'm figuring it out.
Yeah.
And I'm cool with that, honestly.
It's a good strategy.
Yeah. And then another wide receiver room that I think is underrated. It's going to be Tampa Bay's wide receivers.
Yep.
I think all of them are being underdrafted right now. Even Egbuka, who after a huge first half of last year, I think spurred a lot of people in the second half, and some of the love for him kind of faded.
Due to injury, I mean, between him and Baker.
For sure. Due to him and Baker and the offensive line, they had lots of issues all over. I mean, the team just fell apart as a whole in the second half. But I think that he's underrated in fantasy drafts. And outside of him, there is no more Mike Evans. Yeah. And somebody has to catch the ball on the opposite of Egbuka.
For sure.
And whether that's Chris Godwin, Jalen McMillan, or even Ted Hurst, who was somebody that was really popular throughout the rookie draft.
Yeah, and Tez Johnson had a decent season coming in to fill in for Egbuka.
He's a fun story, Everybody was rooting for him. We saw him do some flips and stuff.
Yeah,
he's a fun prospect.
The flips are fun.
And best ball. Maybe Tez Johnson's a good last round flyer.
Yeah,
I like that a lot. But seriously though, that's a huge battle I think to keep an eye on throughout preseason.
Sure.
I really am high on Jalen McMillan. I think he's gonna be a popular sleeper. I think he's starting to rise up draft boards, and somebody that really could be a big contributor this year right away.
Yeah, and given the names that you just kind of rattled off for that wide receiver too, I think that Chris Godwin's kind of a long shot. He's over 30 now and dealing with some injury history.
Yeah,
and has a history of injury history. Yeah, I think Jalen McMillan is in a really good spot to win that job, or at the very least see the field,
Yeah, I think that he really could offer some solid flex upside this season, and somebody that you could draft as your wide receiver 6.
Yeah.
And if it comes down to a big preseason from him, we might see him rise up the board a lot for sure.
Expect it.
We've seen big weeks from him. His rookie season, he put up some monster numbers at the end of that year, and even last year, he was injured most of the year. He had some weird neck injury, and he only played 3 games, and he had a game where he had over 100 yards. He had 7 catches, 120 yards in week 17. Whenever he's been out in the field, he's been extremely productive, and I think entering year 3, the door is wide open. The ceiling is as high as it can be, and in an offense that we kind of expect to get back on track to where it was the first half of last year and 2 years ago, I really think sky's the limit. I mean, Baker Mayfield could very easily throw for over 4,000 yards, and I think that Jalen McMillan could be a huge benefactor of that.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's somebody I love in fantasy drafts, somebody I'm really going to be focused on in preseason, and someone I've already thrown a few prop bets on as well.
Nice.
Yeah. Moving through some other groups, though, is there anything else that stands out to you right away?
I do have a couple of the rookie battles listed out that I'll definitely be keeping my eye on. And staying with wide receiver, I think that Mekhi Lemon and the other receivers that Philly brought in this offseason is an interesting conversation, because I personally don't expect Mekhi Lemon to step into the kind of workload that A.J. Brown saw, even though A.J. Brown had plenty of weeks where he kind of went missing on the stat sheet. I think that's just distraction from the books he was reading, but they bring in Dontavion Wicks, they bring in Hollywood Brown, both of which had pretty decent seasons considering the status of player that they are last year, and should be fitting competition for Mekhi Lemon.
Yeah, I think that not one of those individual players, but the combination of them will take enough snaps away that it'll be relevant and significant.
Especially to start the year.
I was going to say, throughout the course of the season, I'm sure Mekhi Lemon will gradually earn more snaps and targets. I don't really see either of them,
getting in his way.
I don't want to say getting in his way, but being on the field, earning the spot in a 2 wide receiver set or something like that necessarily. I think that it would take, whether it's a blocking thing or something like that, it would take something to take away from Mekhi Lemon.
Sure.
But yeah, I think that that's a good one. And staying in that world too, I think the Browns one is really interesting.
Yeah.
We're talking about when talking about teams that we expect to be losing and throwing the ball a lot.
Right.
Who's going to be catching the ball for the Browns? Jerry Jeudy, not too long. He's still relatively young, honestly.
And he's being underdrafted as well, for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, I think that he's almost guaranteed a spot on the field. But after that, Casey Concepcion, Denzel Boston, and even a guy like Isaiah Bond, who we saw kind of come on the second half of last year.
Yeah.
Undrafted guy, but due to circumstances, somebody that could very easily could have been a day 2 pick, and showed some talent. And there's been some buzz around him as well throughout the offseason. So those are all guys that see how that target breakdown works out. It'll be kind of crazy.
Yeah, and unfortunately for them, they're in probably the worst quarterback situation in the league.
We're talking about the quarterback battle too.
Yeah, we'll see what kind of value the target share actually has for that team. But nevertheless, like it will be interesting to see how it all plays out and how it positions itself going into next season when they inevitably draft their quarterback of the future. So,
right. With their new head coach too and new
Yeah.
offensive system too, that'll be really interesting to see how all of that breaks down and the different usages for these players.
For sure.
And they're all different players, play style wise,
very.
especially, with the two rookies, Concepcion being kind of like a smaller yards after catch guy, and Denzel Boston being more of like kind of
Downfield jump ball.
Yeah, 50-50 downfield. Yeah, so both of them have their own roles, and we'll both see the field. How much that is, given context of each other, will be interesting to see. But yeah, those are two wide receiver battles for the rookies that I think will be really fun to watch in preseason.
Yeah, 100%.
And then moving on to some other wide receiver rooms, Atlanta I think is a good one.
Yeah.
Drake London and Kyle Pitts and Bijan will dominate most of that target share. But outside of that, they have a pretty wide open wide receiver 2 spot.
Yeah.
Jahan Dotson, somebody they signed this year that has kind of been under the radar the past year or two, showing some flashes, whether that was in Washington or in Philly at some moments. Somebody that could easily walk in and win that role. But another guy that they drafted, Zachariah Branch, kind of was a late riser in dynasty drafts. I think going into the draft, he was a little undersized prospect, and nobody really knew exactly where he was going to go. But getting drafted in the 3rd round to a wide open wide receiver room, I think really positioned him to potentially make an impact right away. And seeing how they utilize him in the passing game and maybe even the run game, I think will be something that could be really fun.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. I like him as a late sleeper as well, somebody that maybe even in best ball could be used.
For sure.
And then, the biggest thing in Atlanta is definitely the quarterback battle.
100%.
Tua versus Michael Penix. It's not the best, but it's not Deshaun Cosby and Shedeur Sanders, so there's at least
That's
that.
true. That's true.
I do kind of expect Tua to win, and I think that would be the best for all the pass catchers on the team as far as from a fantasy perspective. But, Michael Penix, not that long ago, top 10 pick, and from the outside looking in, potentially. It's very interesting. His
Such
career.
a head-scratching pick when they made it, too.
Yeah.
They had Cousins. And
They had literally just gave Kirk Cousins so much money. It was so weird. But yeah, Michael Penix, it's going into year 3, and we're already talking about where his career could be going.
He came into the league late, too, so if he going into his 3rd year, he's probably, 26 already at least?
Probably older.
Yeah. So, it's kind of now or never for him, unfortunately, and for that kind of draft capital to spend on that kind of risk, it's
everybody's kind of chalking it up as to his job already, but Michael Penix very well should win that. He doesn't have the luxury of having the coaching staff that initially drafted him, which I think obviously hurts, but he still has the talent, and depending on how that quarterback battle works out, it will really have big impacts on fantasy. I think I mentioned before, with Michael Penix in, Drake London had 4 wide receiver 1 weeks out of 9 weeks or something. So if Michael Penix is the starter entering week 1, Drake London's flying up my boards for sure. Yeah,
100%.
I think that's a fun one. Any other wide receiver rooms or quarterback? I know you got a couple written down.
Yeah, I am interested in the Baltimore receiver room. Changing things up with Declan Doyle is going to make for a little bit of a different look for that offense, just to see how they end up utilizing. They dropped their tight ends outside of Mark Andrews. Charlie Kolar, I believe, is gone.
Yeah.
And obviously Isaiah Likely as well. So they have Zay Flowers, who had a top 10 wide receiver season last year, and we expect him to do more of that. But that wide receiver 2 spot is going to be interesting to watch. It's currently been Rashad Bateman, who, as you very well compared him to Gabe Davis, basically the Gabe Davis of Baltimore for the past
pretty much
5 or 6 years now.
At least we didn't draft Gabe Davis in the 1st round.
Yeah, right. But they did draft 2 rookies this year, Jacoby Lane and Elijah Surratt. I don't know if I lean one way or the other as to who might.
That one is like a true toss-up.
Yeah, but it's a 3-way competition for some pretty valuable field time on a team that I don't expect to play as much 3 or 2 tight end sets that I would have previously.
Yeah, they drafted Jacoby Lane first, and I do think that he has a higher ceiling long term. But I do think that Elijah Surratt is a more polished prospect entering the league, probably a better blocker.
I mean, he's a college championship.
Yeah, probably a 4-year starter.
Right.
He's definitely walking into a better opportunity, I would say. But it could really go any way. And that's one that like you said, I really would have a hard time hanging my hat on either of them at this moment.
Yeah.
True battle, true competition there. And while the wide receiver 2 role in Baltimore hasn't been very lucrative for fantasy intentions, that could be subject to change with Declan Doyle coming in.
Change of
It's a
coaching
whole new
staff.
era.
Everything is not as stable as it was the season prior.
Definitely, I would agree with that. Moving on to another running back room that I'm really intrigued to see if there is any changes. New England. I think that if given the opportunity, TreVeyon Henderson has league-winning upside, especially given where he's drafted right now in his ADP.
Fourth, fifth round.
If we could see it, it's probably going to be more of a split backfield, but if we could see him kind of be more of that 1A rather than that 1B, just seeing what he was able to do in kind of limited capacities last year, I mean, he had some huge weeks down the stretch.
Monster weeks.
I mean, I would love to see TreVeyon Henderson get some more usage. If TreVeyon Henderson gets the first carry in the first quarter of the preseason game, I will be ecstatic. And I think that would go a long way for his prospects in the fantasy world.
I mean, let's be real. Like, Ramondre Stevenson's like 26, 27 years old too now. So, like, even if that...
Dude, he was fumbling so much and they kept giving him the ball. It was insane.
Doesn't make sense.
It was mind-boggling.
So, whether or not he's even around for a couple of years, I mean, TreVeyon Henderson has the potential, especially in these dynasty formats. Like, he is a huge red flag, like buy now kind of player. But yeah, my expectation is that TreVeyon Henderson does take a step forward, but we'll see how soon that's going to be.
At some point this season it will happen, I'm
100%.
sure. It has to, but whether that is, entering the season or if he's kind of still in that 1B role will be something to keep an eye on for sure. Before we wrap it up, I got a few more I want to touch on real quick here. I think one that's pretty interesting is Minnesota. There is a QB battle there. I think we kind of all expect it to be Kyler. And whether that impacts that has on fantasy, whether that be for himself as, we've seen him have high top 5 fantasy QB seasons, but how that affects Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and some of these pass catchers as well.
Yeah.
But the running back room, I think, is kind of under talked about. I think, we know Aaron Jones, but do we really expect Aaron Jones to have that much of a role at this point of his season? He's like 33.
Yeah.
He's the older.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When he takes that sombrero off, you see it. I think that Jordan Mason could really, benefit from a 1A role potentially. Goal line guy, early down guy. And then Damon Claiborne. Yeah, that's a guy that they drafted. Probably the least talked about rookie running back. He's starting to get a little buzz now, but I think that's somebody that we can see really pop in training camp and preseason. Not a huge build, but somebody that has 4.3 speed, just like game-changing ability. Could be a big change of pace guy, and if he can eat into probably more of Aaron Jones' role, I don't really see him taking those early down and goal line touches away from Jordan Mason. Yeah. But he's somebody that we could see being a second half riser in the fantasy world.
Yeah.
Moving on to another one really fast, Tennessee. I'm really interested to see how the wide receiver room shakes out. I want to see Cam Ward's chemistry and connection with Carnell Tate. I think Carnell Tate is another guy that could be a league winner.
He's going like late 5th round, early 6th round.
Yeah, I know that Bleck is a little higher on Wan'Dale Robinson this season.
I am.
And I think there's lots of reasons to think that with his connection with Brian Dable, a little stability there in the offense, more of a check down guy. Yeah. The contract, all the above. I do think that's all fair, but I think when you draft a guy 4th overall, you do it for a reason. And if Carnell Tate can, come out right away and be a true wide receiver 1 like we've seen from some of these top picks in recent drafts. I mean, look at Malik Neighbors as a top 5 pick in the Brian Dable offense not too long ago to what he did in his rookie season. I'm not saying I think that Carnell Tate is necessarily as talented as Malik Neighbors, but if he's afforded a similar opportunity, he could be a huge upside play in the 4th, 5th round of fantasy drafts, and I'm really excited to see how him and Cam Ward can play together in the preseason.
Yeah.
Another thing in Tennessee, too, though, is the running back situation. Someone's going to tote the ball, and someone's going to do it a lot, probably. Brian Dable has, showing a propensity to kind of have a one-man workload, and I think we know that here in Buffalo. Whether that was Devin Singletary or
Zach Moss.
Yeah, Zach. I mean, even Zach Moss wasn't even able to win it. You know,
Right.
Zach Moss barely saw the field. You know,
Yeah.
he fumbled the ball, and that was never saw him again. It was all Devin Singletary. But look at it in New York. You know, Tyrone Tracy got a big workload as a rookie. We saw Cam Scadaboo last year prior to the injury get a big workload as a rookie, and he's not really rotating these guys. You know,
Right.
so whether that's Tony Pollard or
Tyjae Spears.
I'm not really counting Tyjae Spears. I just don't think that. I have the hardest time seeing a path for him to a huge workload.
Yeah.
I think Nick Singleton is a guy that it will be popular in fantasy drafts, and somebody that, you know, maybe could potentially have that league-winning upside second half of the year. We've seen fifth-round picks come in and dominate right away in Brian Dable offenses, and you know, they went and got their guy. And with Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears on one-year deals halfway out the door, that's a guy that I'm really looking forward to seeing in the preseason. I think if he can make some plays in preseason, you know, he could be looking at a role week one, honestly.
Yeah. Tony Pollard's reaching his age 30 season now too, so it's like you said, with Tyjae Spears' limited window for finding that pathway to all those touches, it definitely leaves the door wide open for Nick Singleton for sure.
Yeah, one last running back room I just want to touch on before we wrap it up is in Pittsburgh. I think it was really interesting the way they used Jalen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell last year, where throughout most of his career, Jalen Warren was more of a change of pace, pass catching back.
Yeah.
But with Kenneth Gainwell, we saw Jalen Warren kind of establish more of an early down role, and Kenneth Gainwell being the pass catching back. But now with him gone and the addition of Rico Dowdle,
kind of feels like they're switching it back around
yeah,
a little bit.
Gamecock legend. I think that Jalen Warren is a little undervalued. I think he'll still get a good amount of touches, but we could see him get back up into that 40-50 catch territory, and I think that can boost him up from a flex to like an RB2 potentially. So those are guys I want to see that their usage and how the Pittsburgh attacks that situation.
I want to stick with Pittsburgh for just a second here because I don't really fully trust Aaron Rodgers to play a full 17-game season, and they've got 3 other quarterbacks on the roster that will be interesting to see if
in training camp for sure.
Yeah, especially in training camp.
Not even just for this season though, but for the future.
Yeah,
really.
exactly.
If Drew Aller can play really well in preseason, I know Pittsburgh guys will go crazy.
Or even they will. But or even Will Howard, who was invested in last year.
I like him too.
But if nothing else works and Mason Rudolph ends up being their backup quarterback and ultimately has to see some games this season, which I would kind of expect. Like I said, don't think Aaron Rodgers is playing 17 this year.
Also, the Steelers aren't rostering 4 quarterbacks.
Right,
so,
right. So they're going to cut
one of those guys is going to be the odd man out. So that'll be definitely something that I'm sure all of them will get extensive looks throughout preseason.
For sure.
Yeah. We got lots to look forward to. I'm so excited for the Hall of Fame game in a couple weeks. Football is just around the corner. As always, thank you for listening, and go Bills.
Go Bills.